This is Emily Freitag, and I'm so happy to be here today with Peter Gault, who
Hi
leads
there.
Quill. And so, Peter, kick us off with your own story and what brought you to the point that you are working on this product and set of products.
Absolutely. So the Quill story goes back to 2013. I launched Quill with this big vision of helping tens of millions of young people become strong writers. The inspiration for Quill is that writing is a superpower. That when young people can write, when they can advocate for themselves, it really enables them to succeed both in their own lives and as advocates for their communities. So I was really active in journalism and debate throughout high school and college. And that experience of standing up in front of a crowd, being able to debate an idea, being able to think of counterarguments, that was so vital in my own education. And that as soon as I graduated from college, I knew this is what I was going to do. So I was going to help as many young people as possible to develop these skills. This all led to Quill starting actually as a debate video game. It was a game where you could debate questions and be rewarded for coming up with precise arguments and using evidence. And that was really fun, but it wasn't getting at the foundational skills of writing. And so we pivoted to those foundational skills with the big vision of returning to things like debate and journalism in the future, but knowing that getting the fundamentals right was critical for helping young people.
Mhm. Cool. So, tell us about Quill today. What
Mhm.
are the range of things that Quill offers? And then take us deep on one of them and show us how it works.
Yep. So we're in year 12 of Quill now, and we're really in our second big chapter. So the first decade of Quill was learning to write. And when you look at Quill today, a number of our tools help support that process. We start at third grade, and we see how students who are building basic writing skills often need a lot of support. You'll see things like students often using the word and. They'll write this and this and this and this, and that those students really benefit from strategies like sentence combining. So sentence combining is a great superpower. When you're combining multiple ideas together into a single sentence, it really forces you to think about the logical relationship between the ideas. There's a wealth of research from folks like Steve Graham that show this is really effective, but it's also really hard to do well. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of at-bats, and a lot of feedback. And so when you look at Quill today, there are millions of students and teachers who are using our sentence combining practice to develop those more complex syntax skills. The next chapter of Quill, though, the next decade of Quill that we're in year two of, is writing to learn. And so in this next chapter, it's no longer about just learning how to write, it's about using writing to build your knowledge of the world. And so what that looks like is not just writing in English classes, but also writing in social studies, writing in science. And that in those classes, writing is just a really powerful way of learning. When you have to explain an idea yourself, when you have to defend it, it really builds thinking skills in a way that some of the more basic learning tools, things like multiple choice, don't have the same level of rigor to them. And so in this next chapter of Quill, we're really excited to be able to bring writing across every subject rather than thinking of it as something that only exists in English classrooms.
So, tell us what that means in practice. Like, what does a product that aims to do that look like? And what choices have you made to try to keep that kind of precision, but bring it into a new context?
Absolutely. So for today, we're going to look at one of our new offerings from our social studies curriculum. We built this as a world history offering. It's built with the OER project for teachers familiar with that program. In this program, students are writing about key moments throughout history, focused on building their knowledge of those moments and also getting that writing feedback. This is one of a series of different programs that we're now developing. But for today, we can do a deep dive into that so that you can see it in action.
Yeah, dig in. Let's see it.
Great. Great. Let's jump in. So I'm going to turn on the screen share here now. Let me do a quick recap of what Quill looks like today. So when you go to the Quill homepage, you'll see how Quill helps students become stronger writers and readers. We've now impacted more than 12 million students across the US. These students have
And
written and
just while
received
we're on this
feedback from more
page,
than.
Peter, like,
Mhm.
of note, all of this is free. Is that right? Quill.org. So you are a nonprofit. Tell us your mentality here.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really critical thing for us that I sometimes skip over. We are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. Everything that we build, all of our activities are free for all students and teachers. We don't paywall any of our AI. We think it's really essential that everyone has access to all of these activities. And so right now we have a library of more than 1,000 activities. These activities are for elementary, middle, and high school students. Teachers can log on, they add their students to the platform, The students can then work on the recommended activities either from Quill or the teacher can assign those activities. And then as they're working in every activity, you're writing and receiving feedback. And that feedback is what really helps you to become a stronger writer.
And the feedback is coming from Quill based on how you've trained Quill to give feedback.
Yes. And
Great.
that gets at our biggest challenge, which is that Quill is not just using AI. We are building our own feedback and our own data sets of how we think students should be graded and scored when it comes to writing. And so if you go under the hood with Quill, what powers Quill are data sets of more than 100,000 sentences that our team of former educators have labeled by hand.
Hmm.
It's an extremely expensive process that we've been doing since 2018, and it allows us to grade essentially the writing ourselves rather than having the AI do the grading.
Hmm.
The data set itself dictates how the students receive feedback. And so when you look at Quill today and you go to our homepage, you'll see a number of different learning tools. Today we'll be focused on Quill Reading for Evidence. This is a tool that both builds reading and writing skills. It does this across the curriculum. And
Hmm.
so you'll see that we are building this both for English classrooms, but also science and for social studies. And that today in particular, we'll focus on the social studies offering. For English teachers,
All
we
right,
also
level us
have
up on that for one more second, Peter. If you could just go back. So I'm reading from this that if I'm a science or social studies teacher, I can also use Quill. Tell us how this maps into an English classroom or curriculum specifically.
absolutely. So traditionally, Quill was a supplemental tool, but the next era of Quill is about being embedded in HQIM, high quality instructional materials.
Mhm.
And so what this looks like in practice, we very recently announced a big partnership with Fish Tank. Fish Tank Learning is a knowledge-rich, fantastic program, green rated, that's really getting a lot of traction across the US right now. And so if you are a Fish Tank teacher, you will have a version of Quill designed specifically for each of the core novels that you're teaching and
Mhm.
that you can follow that sequence of practicing and writing in the context of those units. For other teachers that we don't yet support their programs, we have a big library of general purpose activities,
Mhm.
but we will be building out very quickly many new activities aligned to these great programs so that teachers using a variety of knowledge-rich programs can benefit from Quill in a really intentional, aligned way, as opposed to as a supplemental offering.
Got it. Great. Okay, take us into social studies.
Great. And then the last thing I'll share before we just jump in is that for those teachers focusing on learning to write, you'll see some of these tools here focused on that sentence combining, for example, our lessons tool that allows for modeling, our diagnostics. All of our diagnostics are free assessments that teachers can use that help teachers identify areas of strength and growth opportunities for students.
Cool.
But for today, we're going to look at our new social studies offering. So what you'll see is if you click here, you'll pull up our new offerings. We have two world history courses, a
Hmm.
1200 to the present and a 1750 to the present offering. When you click into the 1200 to the present offering, you'll see that these activities span each of those units that a high school world history teacher will often teach, and that Quill is a once per week deep dive on an interesting and important and vital topic within world history. And so our goal is not to be the textbook. There are great offerings out there that provide that. Quill in particular has partnered with the OER project. And so every single Quill activity is paired with an OER project offering.
Hmm.
You can see here, for example, that with this particular activity, looking at how did pirates disrupt sea routes in East Asia, that pairs to this article about trade. And this provides a sort of traditional textbook style approach. The OER project is a fantastic resource for social studies teachers who are not using it. It's got a wealth of freely available materials, and that the Quill offering really allows you to go deeper on top of these great materials. So in this case today, as you look through this list, you'll see the different activities. We're going to look at this activity in particular. How did horses reshape Indigenous Americans' ways of life? So for students, what they'll do is that they'll be assigned this activity. This will often be paired again with that moment in
Is this
time where
typically high school students, or this can be across middle school and or high school?
this particular activity is designed for primarily high school students, but
Uh-huh.
also could be appropriate for an eighth grade student learning world history,
Okay,
um, either at or above grade level, but for a high school student at or below grade level in terms of the lexile level of the text.
great.
So here's what you're looking at. You'll see in this quill activity that there's a reading text on the left-hand side and a writing prompt on the right-hand side. There are many other tools out there that also provide reading text to students, but excuse me, what makes Quill unique is the focus on writing. And so students will go through this text, learn about this history of how horses reshaped Indigenous Americans' ways of life. As they're reading through the text, they're then asked to write this prompt. Horses became more widely available to Plains Indians across North America during the 16th century because dot dot dot. And so in this case here, the students have to find evidence from the text to support this claim.
So it's like a
Um,
sentence starter that begins the writing journey.
Exactly. And this is all meant to let the student analyze the text and it gives them a scaffold, but asks the student to find what is that precise evidence that explains the impact of horses
Mhm.
on Indigenous Americans. And so in this case here, the students will write, and we'll often see students writing things like, because there were more there,
Hmm.
right? Um, and this response kind of makes sense. But it's not obviously getting at the specific evidence of how horses became more widely available. When you press get feedback with Quill, we say, that's true. Now be more specific. What led to this population growth in North America? And so the core of Quill is all about using precise evidence from the text to support your claim. And the student really has to go back to the article and read it more carefully to try to find these ideas. So let's say the student is revising now, and the student says, what led to this population growth? You could say, because the Spanish explorers brought them over. Get feedback. Quill says, it's true, Spanish explorers brought these horses to North America. Now be more specific. How are they able to bring them over? And so what makes Quill unique is that we're never just saying this is a right answer, this is a wrong answer. It's all about what is an exemplary answer. And that to build an exemplar, you really have to use strong evidence from the text to support a claim. So in this case here, asking the student again to go back to the article, read it more carefully, and sort of pull out sort of specifically the idea of the Columbian Exchange, which is really how these horses became more widely available. That's a really critical idea from the text here. And as the students are reading, they're able to engage with this. And so let's say the student's reading and they're revising, they're not quite getting that idea. They may say, because the Spanish explorers brought them over by boats. This is again true, but not quite getting at that precise knowledge.
Okay,
Um,
so now we're getting a little assist here. Look at
yes,
this paragraph in particular.
exactly.
Hmm.
So this one assist looks simple. It was about a year of work for us in R&D. What's happening here is that under the hood with Quill, we often see that with Quill and other AI-powered tools, students at some point will get stuck. They're writing, they're getting feedback, they're revising, they're getting more feedback, they're revising again. And there's a real risk here of the students getting stuck and not knowing how to revise and improve their writing. And so the student keeps saying the same thing to the AI keeps saying the same thing back to the student.
Hmm.
And that's a real failure mode where a teacher knows the student needs more support. The teacher, a teacher sitting down next to a student would say, hey, check out this paragraph right here. The
Hmm.
teacher is not going to tell the answer to the student, but they're going to give enough of that support for the student to be able to improve their work. And so what happens with Quill is that we have essentially an agent that is watching as the student is writing and looking for, is the student getting stuck? And when
Hmm.
it sees that, it throws up a flag in our system that says, hey, this student needs more support. That then triggers another agent that says, okay, based on what the student's writing about, what section of the source text is most relevant? In
Hmm.
this case, it's this paragraph right here. And so while this looks very simple, under the hood, having these agents to help support the learning enables for this scaffolded experience where when the students need that extra assist, we can provide it. And that in turn allows students to develop these knowledge-based responses as a core part of the learning on Quill.
Cool.
And
Let's keep going. I want to see what
yeah,
happens
let's let's
at the
keep
end.
going. So they
Yeah.
brought them over by boats through, and you'll see right here, right? It's that the Columbian Exchange in particular is
Hmm.
how they're able to bring livestock to North America through the Columbian Exchange. Nice work. Use information from the text to explain why horses became more widely available to Plains Indians in the 16th century.
Okay, so it went from yellow to green, and I'm not getting like a 3 out of 4, but I'm getting a clear indicator that I got to expectation here.
Yes. And
Great.
so across each of the quill prompts, this is the first prompt that students work on. They're then given the same claim followed by the word but to provide an opposing idea, and then the same claim followed by the word so to provide a result. And
Mm-hmm.
so in using because, but, and so, the students have to look at this same source text from multiple angles. They have to show evidence to support the claim and oppose the claim, and they really have to think deeply about the text. A really common pattern is that when we first see students using Quill, they'll skim right through it, right? They'll read through it very quickly. They'll just sort of move right on to the writing, and that they can't move on until they've built a strong text-based response. It has to be text dependent. And when they don't do that, Quill very gently coaches them and provides them feedback to help revise their writing to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't let you move on until you've gotten there. So under the hood, that's where our custom data set comes in. The data set is hundreds of examples of how other students have responded to that prompt. Students who have both done well and written exemplars, and students who wrote vague or inaccurate responses and needed feedback. And we, by hand, with our team of teachers, map out all these things that students said and the feedback they should receive. We
Mm-hmm.
then feed that all into the AI. So rather than the student just seeing what, say, ChatGPT would say on its
Sure.
own to the student, it's instead using this data set with hundreds of examples of scored writing, and that's what tells the student you should keep going, or this was a strong response. That allows us for a level of rigor that other tools don't quite have, that we can really push the student to go further in their responses. And that's really what makes Quill so rigorous is
Mm-hmm.
all that those nudges, those cycles, those pushes. Quill can be quite hard for students when they first get started. We'll see
Mm-hmm.
that students
Yeah, how
often
long does
need
it take? Like in the course of a lesson, what happens before, during, and after quill, and how long does it typically take?
for sure. It when students first start, it can take about 20 to 25 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But then over the course of the school year, the magic is that students really gain this ability to use evidence in the writing. We
Mm-hmm.
see this in our data. We see a really clear improvement in how much feedback students need, and that over time they need less feedback. They're able to build exemplars with fewer rounds of feedback. They can more quickly build those exemplary responses, and that really reflects that learning that's happening over the course of the school year. Um, but it takes a lot of practice. So students will often do about 50 of these prompts over the course of a school year,
Mm-hmm.
and that
What is
is
that? Like
what enables
once
that
a
growth.
week or twice a week?
It's about once per week.
Mm-hmm. Got
And we
it.
think that's important because we think AI and writing is a really important and valuable use of time, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of other things competing for classroom time as well. And so a once per week activity focused on writing for about 15 to 20 minutes can be a really strong value add, but
Mm-hmm.
taking up too much classroom time then starts to compete with the core program that Quill is paired with.
Makes sense. And tell us what you know about impact. You've started to talk about what your internal data shows. Tell us kind of, is Quill doing the job that you want it to do yet? And to what extent do you know how kids using Quill perform relative to other similar students in different situations? And then what are you hoping to do next?
Yeah, those are great questions. So we're very fortunate to have some researchers work with us to run a few studies. So I'll flip on our results page here. These are some of our current studies, and we have a few new studies in progress. So this first study here was with Lean Lab Education. We found that students using Quill had a 1.6x rate of growth. And then in particular, when you look at the data, the students at Title I schools had the greatest growth. They had a 38% overall improvement as opposed to a 24% improvement for students in non-Title I schools. As a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, that's what we're looking to see in our data is to making sure that Title I students are really uh, using Quill effectively, and it's helping them to improve their writing skills.
And this is as measured on what kind of outcome?
So this particular study was a bit unique. It's looking at 100,000 students on the Quill platform.
Uh-huh.
And so with this big study, it's leveraging our assessments to measure their growth,
Okay.
some of our diagnostics. I will jump to an external study, though, done by the College Board. So the College Board has been a big partner with Quill. There's an official offering for AP, pre-AP, and for Springboard on the Quill site. In their evaluation, they ran an RCT and they were looking at students using Quill as opposed to the control group. And
Hmm.
so what we'll see here in a second, there's an animation that will walk through this. The students using Quill had a 15-point average score
Hmm.
before Quill. After Quill, that jumped to 25.9, and that persisted after 2 weeks and 2 months in these delayed assessments. Over that same period of time, the control group was flat. There was no growth. And so what's so exciting about this is that often educational research will show growth immediately after an intervention, but that won't show up in delayed
Sure.
assessments.
Yeah. And this here is on what kind of assessment as
Yeah.
well?
So this is a independent measure of writing developed by the College Board, leveraging rubrics that they have used for some of their other work,
Okay.
and that the assessment is looking specifically at growth in sentence level writing.
And this was the sentence combining tool that you talked about. Is that right? That was
Yes.
the intervention on this one. Great.
Yes.
So you've talked a little bit about your roadmap from here. It sounds like you're going deeper into curriculum partnerships and ELA with knowledge-rich curriculum. You're building out new social studies and science tasks and tools. Tell us anything else that you want people to know about where you're headed.
So the big picture for Quill is to be in every subject every week. We see a lot of value in writing in every subject. It really builds your critical thinking skills. Social studies and science are places where writing can be really important and really valuable, but there aren't as many opportunities. Those teachers don't see themselves as writing teachers. And
Mhm.
so the ability to impact those students is a massive opportunity. It's all predicated on being able to leverage new AI. So AI has now been around for a few years, but the Quill scale, we need AI to be highly accurate and it needs to be able to assess knowledge. And
Mhm.
that's what we've seen as the big obstacle is that AI can sometimes see patterns, it can see skills, but how does it know whether a student had the right ideas in their response?
Mhm. On
It
that
can't
particular task. Yep.
exactly.
Mhm.
And that needs to be defined. You can't just trust the AI on its own to do that. You have
Mhm.
to define task by task.
Mhm.
Here's what good writing is for a task about writing about mitosis in a biology class for a seventh
Based
grade
on
student.
this text. Yeah.
Exactly. And that could look quite different for, say, a high school student who's also writing at the same concept. And so for Quill, what's so exciting is that we've spent 8 years building the underlying infrastructure that allows us to build those particular knowledge banks, the knowledge banks that allow for that assessment of ideas. And that allows us to now move across subjects, also to explore moving into longer pieces of writing. If you look
Mhm.
at Quill today, all of our writing is at the sentence level. We
Mhm.
spent the last 12 years helping students build strong sentences. In the future, we're really excited to be able to do longer pieces of writing. When you
Mhm.
look at things like assessments of writing, they're often at the paragraph level. You
Mhm.
build a claim, use evidence to support it. Uh,
Over multiple sentences to structure a big idea. Yep.
yes, and that was hard to do with AI a while ago, but
Mhm.
now is possible. And
Mhm.
that can be really powerful. There's a study that you had mentioned to me before about how even getting one practice of a writing assessment for a state exam can make a significant impact on a student's ability to then
Mhm.
perform better on that state exam. And
Yes.
so if
To
we
be
can
clear, the
provide,
study also found that more than one had diminishing returns. So, not seeking to promote an over-testing mentality here, but yes.
sure, right. But is all to say that those students get, at the moment, very few at bats. And so, can
Yeah.
we create an opportunity for those students? Something that we're really excited by. We see that there's a lot of work that you could build these things very quickly if you don't build them well. Building them well requires a lot more time, a lot more data.
Yeah.
Those big data sets are really what power the AI and make it accurate and effective. But for Quill, it's doable. We've been doing it for years, and we see a really clear path to doing this at
Yeah.
scale. We are now serving about 2.5 million students each school year. We could be serving 10 million students. And I think for us, that represents sort of the ambition of Quill is to be serving, there's about 30 million students in middle school and high school in the US. If we could be
Mhm.
serving 10 million of those students, one out of every three students could benefit from Quill and become a stronger writer. So there's a
Ambitious
lot of work to come.
aspiration. Yeah. Very interesting to hear. Well, thank you so much, Peter. It's great to hear. about you and about Quill, and excited to continue learning together.
Great. Thanks, Emily. I really appreciate being able to share our work with the world.